Morning. We're going to be in Exodus 19. I think we got two more coming in. Put this here for them when they... All right. Exodus 19. Let's go ahead and pray, and we'll get started this morning. Father, thank you for your goodness to us. Another opportunity to study your word together. Pray that this would be a fruitful time. Pray that you bless our time together. Please use this to instruct us, to better understand your word and your plan for the ages. In Jesus' name, amen. So we are looking at Exodus, and I apologize if my voice sounds hoarse. I had whatever that junk is that's going around, and I think the worst is over. It's just getting it out of my chest now. But so if I start squeaking and stuff, that's why. Let's see here. Would you mind taking this back there, Harold? Thank you. All right, so Exodus 19, children of Israel have left Egypt. They have crossed the Red Sea. They've wandered around for 3 months. You notice here in chapter 19 and verse 1, it says, "In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came they into the wilderness of Sinai." So they're 3 months now having been delivered from Egypt. They've been wandering around. God's provided some miracles for them. He has sustained them during this time miraculously by sending manna. And you say, well, what is manna? Exactly. That's what the word manna means. What is this? Because they didn't know what it was either. It was kind of like a bread/seed, kind of a wafer type thing, and they could grind it up and they could make bread with it, or they could eat it as is, and it tasted like honey. And that's what the Lord sustained them with for 40 years, and He provided some meat for them miraculously. He provided water for them out of the rock. Now they're coming to the point where God is going to establish His covenant with the people of Israel. They are going to be His choice nation, and He's going to establish His covenant. So now notice here, He's going to give them His law. This is what this section is about. 19 through 24 is about the law being given. So notice here, if we go down, while God had, we'll just read the first paragraph here. While God had redeemed, guided, and provided for Israel in the wilderness, it was still unclear how they were to relate to God and the world. So they've been in Egypt, for 400 years. They've been slaves in Egypt. They didn't have any type of freedom. They don't know what their place is in the world. And here God has, they knew about the Lord, but we don't know how much about Him they knew. God had not yet, as far as His Word goes, revealed to them how they relate to Him, how they approach Him, what He expects of them. And so this is all unclear at this point. Now what's going to happen here in a formal way with the law being given to them is that God is going to give them some laws, some ordinances, some commandments in order to be able to approach Him. He's going to reveal what His expectations of them are as a people and how they can have a relationship with Him. And so these issues here are resolved by the law. The law provides a standard of righteousness. How do we know right from wrong? By looking at God's standard. This is one of the things that we need to understand. When we come out of the world, when we get saved and we're redeemed and we come out of the world, and I know this is hard for us to understand, but just because we think something doesn't mean it's right. It's easy for us to think something is like, well, that makes sense to me, so it must be right. Well, not usually, honestly. Our thinking, I'm reading The Pilgrim's Progress to the boys at night, And Pilgrim's Progress is an allegory that was written in the 1600s, and it's about basically about the Christian life, going from being lost in the world, the city of destruction, and going to the celestial city, and it's about the journey we have going there. Well, we're in a chapter now where a man named Christian and Hopeful are having a conversation with a man named Ignorance. And part of the conversation is that they're having with Ignorance is like, well, I have a good heart and I do good things. And the question then is, well, how do you know that you're doing it? Well, I think it. I think it's good. And Christian Hopeful are explaining to him, no, the only way you are thinking right about yourself and the only way you have a right heart is if you're thinking what God's Word says about everything. And if you're thinking rightly about God and about yourself according to His Word. That's the only way it's right. And that's what we have to understand. This is what Paul talks about in Romans chapter 12, where he says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercy of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And so our minds have to be renewed. We're coming from one way of thinking that is contrary to God, and now the entirety of our lives after we're saved is learning how to think and act the way God thinks and acts. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be like Jesus. And that's one of the purposes of the law being given to the children of Israel, is they have no idea what God's expectation is. Their way of thinking, obviously, is that of Egypt. Because when God's giving this law to them, what do? When he's late after chapter 19 here, after 19 and 24, once we get up into chapter 30, Moses goes up into the mountain for 40 days to receive 2 tablets of stone with the law on it. And what happens during those 40 days? Well, we don't know where Moses is. We don't know what happened to him. You need to make us a god to go before us. And so they make the golden calf. Their thinking is still that of Egypt. Numerous times over the course of their journey in the wilderness, oh man, I wish we had died in Egypt. I wish we never come out. At least in Egypt, we had leeks in garlic. And that's a wonderful thought. Everybody, they slept real good. They slept alone, but they all slept really good. Leeks and garlic all the time for a steady diet. You can't, that's not, that doesn't even sound appealing. There's some people, my wife likes onions and garlic, not me. Not that much, not as much. So, but God's giving them bread from heaven. He's miraculously, on a couple of occasions, sending them meat. And they would rather go back to Egypt and die. Why? Because that's what they knew. Their mind needed to be renewed. And that's exactly the way it is with us. So let's drop down here now. So this section here in chapters 19 through 24 is going to, going from 19 through the end of the book of Exodus, it covers approximately 11 months they're going to stay at the base of Mount Sinai. So they've had the Passover in Egypt. They've come out. They're 3 months in. A little over a year, they're going to be here at the base of Mount Sinai. And they're going to receive all these instructions that we see in Exodus and Leviticus and the beginning part of Numbers here. So let's read here these, starting here with verse 2, chapter 19, verse 2. For they were departed from Rephidim and were come to the desert of Sinai and had pitched in the wilderness. And there Israel camped before the mount. And Moses went up unto God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now that expression there, bear you on eagle's wings, that's a significant expression. It refers to the way God miraculously provided for them. So he brought them out miraculously through judgment out of Egypt. He provided a means of escape for them. He protected them and delivered them going through the Red Sea. He destroyed their enemies. He's provided water and food for them, and he has guided them through the wilderness up to this point for 3 months. And so he describes that as being eagle's wings. Now, the reason this is significant is going to be brought up again, I think, in Deuteronomy And then we're going to see it again in Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12, we have Israel being described as a woman during the tribulation period who is going to flee from the Antichrist into the wilderness. And it says she is going to be given 2 wings of an eagle. And what is that? God is going to miraculously provide and deliver Israel during the tribulation period. Even though they are in an unbelieving state as a nation, or unbelieving condition as a nation, God is going to provide for them to sustain and keep them until the end of the tribulation when Jesus reveals himself to them. Remember, Jesus says in Matthew 24, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. He's talking about Israel. Israel's not going to pass. It's going to be a tremendous judgment upon the world. Hot, furious judgment is going to come against Israel during that time from the Antichrist. But God is going to bear them on eagle's wings. God is, no matter how bad that gets, the Lord is going to keep his promise to preserve Israel through that period of time. Any question on that? I know that was a lot. Okay, let's keep going here. So he says, I bear you on eagle's wings, verse 4, brought you unto myself. Now therefore, now watch this. Watch these clauses here. If ye will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then shall ye be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. So, here God's giving the law. Notice here, in verse 5, this is a conditional covenant made with the nation of Israel. This is important to understand. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about often, and you're going to hear it repeated, the church and Israel are not the same. Okay? We are under a different covenant. We are under the new covenant. Now, the new covenant is not a conditional covenant. This covenant says, if you obey, then you'll be blessed. But that's not the new covenant. The new covenant is not after this manner. God says, I'm going to bless you, I'm going to change you, I'm going to do this. I'm going to perform the work in that one. This one, you're obligated to work in order to receive the blessing. Now notice here, Galatians makes it clear that this covenant was added to the Abrahamic covenant until the seed should come, talking about Jesus. It was conditional and temporary in nature and was designed to be the means by which the nation of Israel could partake of the physical blessings of the Abrahamic covenant and enjoy God's presence until the new covenant is established. So, the Abrahamic covenant, not only were there spiritual blessings as part of the Abrahamic covenant, but the Abrahamic covenant also provided for them land and physical blessings. He's going to give them a great lot of land. He's all the way from the Nile River over to the Euphrates River, all the way up and around over Lebanon to the Mediterranean Sea. All of that was going to belong to Israel. That's the promise. Now, God says the only way you get to enjoy that is if you obey my law. You keep my covenant, and you can enjoy that. That is the purpose of this until Jesus comes. Because when Jesus comes, Genesis chapter 48, when Shiloh comes, when Jesus comes, when the Messiah comes, sets up his kingdom, that's when Israel is going to enjoy all of that unconditionally under the new covenant. But until then, the only way Israel gets to enjoy the land is if they keep God's covenant. Now, do they keep God's covenant? No. In fact, later on we're going to find out later in Exodus and then in Deuteronomy, God is even going to tell them, if you break my covenant, and you will. You are going to break my covenant. I am going to kick you out of the land. But I will bring you back, and I'm going to restore you, and then you will enjoy all the blessings eventually. And so, this is a conditional covenant. This is the way Israel gets to enjoy the Abrahamic covenant until Jesus comes. Now, notice here, covenants and dispensations. Want to just cover this. We're not going to look up all these verses just for sake of time, but do just want us to have kind of an understanding of this. So the Mosaic covenant, that's what we're getting into. This is what this is typically referred to as the Mosaic covenant, or we refer to it as the Old Covenant now in the New Testament. The Mosaic covenant was given to Israel in 3 divisions. Okay? The covenant itself is a whole. Okay? The law is a whole, but you can divide it up into 3 divisions. There's the commandments, which deal mostly with the moral law. Don't commit adultery, don't lie, don't steal, honor your parents. Those things those are moral. Those are things that everybody knows. Those are wrong. You don't do those things. So those are the commandments, and they express the righteous will of God. There's the judgments, which deal with the civil law. So this is going to deal with our community relationships, how we deal with one another. It's going to deal with conservation laws. It's going to deal with houses. When you build your house, you have to put a rim around the roof. That way nobody falls off of it. And if somebody falls off of it, then you're the one that's responsible for it. Various things like that. Then there's the ordinances. These are the religious laws. So this governs the priesthood, the sacrifices, various things like that. This is the way their religious life is to be observed, and this is how they approach God, how they worship Him. And so the commandments and the ordinances together formed one religious system called the law. So when you read through the New Testament especially, you'll see Paul making mention numerous times about the law. This is what he's referring to, is the whole covenant that was made. The commandments, Paul says in 2 Corinthians, was a ministry of condemnation and death. Because the commandments, the law, it could command, it could condemn, but it could not enable a person to obey it. That's why the new covenant is so much better. Because God says, for the new covenant, I'm going to put my laws into your heart. I'm going to put a new spirit and a new heart within you, and I'm going to cause you to walk in my ways. So God is the one doing the work in the new covenant. The old covenant didn't offer that. The ordinances gave the people a representative with the Lord through the high priest, and the sacrifices were an atonement for their sins in anticipation of the cross. So through the law, through this whole system, God was giving His expectations. He was revealing sin to them, but He was also revealing, look, I still want to have fellowship with you, and here is how we can have a relationship. It's going to require blood. It's going to require a mediator. You have to have a priest. Now, we have a better mediator. The Lord Jesus Himself is the one mediator between God and men, Paul says. Now, the stewardship of this covenant is called often the dispensation of the law. It begins at Sinai, here in chapter 20, and it's going to continue all the way through until the cross, till Jesus dies. That's when the new covenant goes into effect, Hebrews tells us there. And so when the new covenant goes into effect, once Jesus dies on the cross, this Mosaic covenant, this covenant with Israel, then, Paul tells us in Hebrews, becomes old, and the new covenant goes into force then, and there's a change of the law, and there's a change of the priesthood, because you were going to go from the Aaronic, Levitical priesthood of the Old Testament, where Jewish priests were doing this, to a priesthood after the order of Melchizedek. And the order of Melchizedek, Jesus is the one who holds that, and He intercedes on our behalf, and it's an everlasting priesthood. So it's a better priesthood. So in the previous dispensation, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and multitude of other individuals failed the test of faith and obedience, which were man's responsibility. Egypt also failed to heed God's warning. Remember the Abrahamic covenant? I will bless him that blesses you. I will curse him that curses you. Well, did Egypt bless or curse Abraham's descendants? Cursed them. And God judged them for it. They failed under that dispensation as well. And so God nevertheless provided a deliverer, a sacrifice, and miraculous power to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. Israel is placed under the law because of their transgressions, and so the law teaches the holiness of God, the exceeding sinfulness of sin, the necessity of obedience, the universal nature of man's sinfulness, the marvel of God's grace in providing a way to approach Him through blood sacrifice, looking forward to the Savior, who would be the Lamb of God to take away the sin of the world. Any questions on that? Okay. So now let's look over here at chapter 20 of Exodus. So this is they've come to the base of the mountain. They've been there for 3 days now. God has given them instructions. Men and women were to keep themselves away from each other. Husbands and wives keep themselves away from each other. They're to be clean before the Lord. And then nobody's supposed to touch the mountain. Moses is going up there. Nobody's supposed to touch the mountain. If an animal touches the mountain, put an arrow through it. You kill it. So Moses is going to go up now on the third day to receive God's commandment. The Lord comes down onto the mountain in fire and smoke. And actually, this is one of the interesting things. You go over to Saudi Arabia there, where Jabal al-Lawz is, the mountain of laws, where Mount Sinai is, and the top of it is actually scorched. It's still scorched today. You can see the scorch marks. It's dark at the top because it was on fire. But there's no wood or anything around there to be on fire. It's just because God came down and burnt the mountain. But notice here, let's look at this here. We have the Ten Commandments, verse 1. God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. So that's the Ten Commandments in full. Now, here's what we want to do. We want to look at this. We'll go ahead and take the time to do this. We'll talk about the Ten Commandments, and then we'll finish this up next week, and then I'll have an extra thing to do next week on this. Let's go over to Matthew chapter 22. Keep your place here, because we're going to come back to this. But let's go over to Matthew 22 and just kind of think through some of this. We know from, is it chapter 32? I think it's chapter 32. Moses goes up onto the mountain and he gets the 2 tables of stone. God carves out 2 tables of stone from the side of the mountain, and he etches into it with the finger of God, it says, the Ten Commandments. But here, Matthew 22, and just kind of thinking about this, why does he come down with 2 tables of stone? Now, there's different reasons. Well, I think there's one legitimate reason, but typically how we see this, if you see like pictures of the Ten Commandments, or you watch the movie The Ten Commandments, or you get the pictures or the little, I don't know if you want to call them icons or whatever, and you get the little plaque of the Ten Commandments that you sit on your desk or whatever, and you'll have the 2 tables of stone pictured there, and you'll have them split between the 2, kind of divided in half, 4 or 5 on one, and then 5 or 6 on the other then. And people often think, and I guess it's understandable to think that, well, the reason there's 2 tables of stone because there's 10 commandments, and even in law, when we think of law, maybe not so much anymore, but it used to be, you find it in the writings where they talk about the purpose of government is to enforce the second table of the law, and referring to, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, those things like that. And that is the responsibility of government, is to enforce those things, Paul tells us in Romans chapter 13. But let's look here at Matthew 22, in verse number 37. Well, verse 34, let's back up there. But when the Pharisees had heard that he had put the Sadducees to silence, they were gathered together. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment of the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So here Jesus divides the Ten Commandments into two sets, basically. So you have one part of the law that deals with how we love God. Okay, that's obvious. That's going to be your first four commandments. Deal with that. Have no other gods before me. Don't make a graven image. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. Keep the Sabbath day. And then the other part, the other six, teach us how we love our neighbor. Don't commit adultery. Don't lie. Don't steal. Don't covet their things. Honor your parents. Those are good ways to show that you love somebody, by things that you don't do as well. But is that why there's two tables of stone? Is it because, and that's why people often think the commandments are divided up between the two tables of stone. They're not. Notice here in the blue box there, where the covenant is established. So the Decalogue, this is something that they've discovered a little bit more recently, within the last 100 years or so. The Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, are patterned after ancient covenants called a suzerainty treaty. That's what this is called. Where a conqueror makes a treaty with the conquered to benefit them with his protection and care if they would abide by the treaty. It's kind of like, you think of New York City, and you have the gang come in, the mob boss comes in, hey, you owe me a due and I'll protect you, type thing. It's kind of the same lines. Here's a powerful king and his kingdom. We will protect you, but there's certain obligations you have to meet. And this is exactly what God is doing with the nation of Israel. And all of these treaties are set up this way. There's a preamble, a prologue, a stipulation, a document clause, sanctions, list of witnesses, and it's always in two sets. So you go and you buy a car or you buy a house, and there's a lot of paperwork you have to sign when you do this. And half of it you get to keep, and half of it is going to stay with the dealership, or it's going to get filed with the state or whatever is going on. Why is that? Well, it's kind of the same treaty, kind of the same concept. That I'm agreeing to certain obligations, and so I'm going to have a copy of all those terms and obligations, and they're going to keep a copy of those terms and obligations. So notice here, there's the preamble, which identifies the giver of this treaty. In verse 2 here of chapter 20, it says, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. What's he doing? He's declaring his lordship. I am superior to you, and I am more powerful. You are mine. That's what he's saying there. Then there's a prologue. It reminds the relationship. I brought you out. He has the stipulations. These are the laws that are given here in these 4 chapters. There's the document clause, which provides for the reading. This is why there's 2 tables of stone. Because Israel, it's a picture that Israel has a copy and God has a copy for himself. This is the imagery that's being given. Then there's the sanctions, the blessing and curses for incentives. There's the list of witnesses, which we get over the course of the rest of the Pentateuch. You hear it numerous times throughout there. God says, I call heaven and earth to record against you this day. You're going to keep my laws, or I'm going to curse you. And then there's the 2 sets. So why is there 2 tables? Because that document clause. They have to be able to read it and relearn it. Now, I want to just kind of note through here a couple of things here. So we have the 10 Commandments, notice here. You have no other gods before me, not make any graven image. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. What does it mean to take the name of the Lord thy God in vain? When we think of taking the Lord's name in vain, notice it does not say use the Lord's name in vain. says to take the name of the Lord in vain. What does that mean? Where? That's not fair. What do we think of? Cussing, yeah. That's usually how we think of it. Now, certainly that is involved, but it goes beyond that. Keep your place here. Go over to Proverbs. Proverbs 30. Now, Proverbs 30 here, this is I always like this proverb because my name's here. The words of Agur, the son of Jake, that's actually how it's supposed to be pronounced, Jake, which is an abbreviated form of Jacob, even in the Hebrew. Even the prophecy that the man spake to Ithiel and unto Ucal. Now, notice down here, verse number 7, what he says. 2 things have I required of thee. Deny me them not before I die. Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me. Now watch what he says. He says, basically he's saying, look, I don't want to be rich. I don't want to have all the frills. I want enough to get by. Because he's fearful of something. Lest I be full, watch this, and deny thee and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain. See, taking the Lord's name in vain, it means just that we're taking God's name to ourselves in vain. See, when we get saved, we become Christians. We're taking the Lord's name. But if a person is a false convert, they're taking the Lord's name in vain. Judas would be a classic example of this. He's somebody that took the Lord's name in vain. He became a disciple of Jesus Christ, but it was in vain. He took that name. And so here he's saying, look, if I have all these other things, there's a possibility that I could I'm fearful that I would turn away and deny the Lord and end up taking his name in vain. That's such a fearful thing. And then he says, over in Exodus, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. What's the Sabbath day? What's the Sabbath day? It's a day of rest. What did you say? Okay. The 7th day of the week. Thank you. What day is that? That's Saturday. Not Sunday. So today is not the Sabbath day. That was yesterday. Now, here's something to consider too. Which Sabbath do we observe? Because do you observe it in Israel, or is it the same all the way around? Because Israel has a totally different calendar than we do. Their religious calendar is totally different than ours. So how do you know? See, this is part of the problem. Now, did God ordain for you and I to keep the Sabbath day? Let's look at this. Go over to chapter 31. Now, I think there's a good principle here that we should have a day of rest, or a day where we set aside that if it's not absolutely essential, we're not going to do it. We're just going to have a day because we need that. I think that was a principle the Lord was laying out in Genesis. 6 days shalt thou work and do all thy labor, and the 7th day you rest. I think that's a good principle. But notice here, chapter 31, verse 12, what God says here about the Sabbath day. Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak thou unto the Gentiles. Is that what he says? Speak to the world. Is that what he says? Speak to who? Children of Israel. Learn to read, Harold. Clean your glasses off, man. He says, "Verily, my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you." So notice, God says the Sabbath is a sign between me and Israel. It's not a sign between him and the church. What's the sign of the new covenant between Christ and the church? It's communion. Remember? Jesus says the night that he's betrayed, "This is the new covenant in my blood." That's the sign of the new covenant. The sign of the old covenant was the Sabbath. Circumcision is a sign of the Abrahamic covenant. Okay? So, different things there. Each covenant has a sign. So this was something for Israel. Now the problem with this is that the only way you can keep the religious laws, the ceremonies, is two things are necessary. One, Israel has to be in the land. Israel, as a nation, is not in the land. And there's some Jews there, and there's a lot of Jews there, but there's more Jews outside of Israel today than there are in Israel. And secondly, you have to have a temple and a priesthood. You have to have the whole system. It is impossible for anybody to keep the Mosaic Law today. It cannot be kept. It has to have the temple and the priesthood. So this is not something, we'll talk about that a little bit more next week, but this is not something that was given to us. Now, there are moral aspects of the law, right? And it's still wrong to commit adultery. We don't commit adultery. It's not okay to lie. It's not okay to steal. It's not okay to dishonor your parents. Okay? But when it comes to the Sabbath, we're not under the Sabbath law anymore. In fact, we'll find later that somebody goes out on the Sabbath day to collect sticks to start a fire to keep warm in their house, and God says, "You need to stone that man." We're not under that. It's absolutely impossible. Now, this last paragraph here real quick. So, contrary to popular opinion, there are more than 10 commandments. The 10 commandments are the basic terms of the relationship. And these form the basis for an additional 603 commands, totaling 613 that are developed over the remainder of the Pentateuch. These additional commands show us what the 10 commandments look like in practice, what it looks like to love God and to love your neighbor. Okay, any questions on any of that? I think we're going to go ahead and stop there, and then we'll get into the rest of this next week. Questions? Thoughts? Concerns? Any input? Okay. Cool. You're dismissed.